In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. We go to page 189 and talk about 5.2 and begin actually with 5.2.1. The evidence available to the first language learner. Okay? We have to, in fact, find the evidence available to the child. Okay? Line 1. A constant theme in Chomsky's writing is the nature of evidence available to the child. What type of evidence is available to the child? In order for us to understand, the book gives you one bad example, and the example is a kind of game played, okay, on a board, okay. It is called snooker. It is popular in Iran, but it's not very popular. I think it is. I think it is not very popular in Iraq as well. Well, a good kind of thing is a kind of example like Kuratul Qadam, like football. Okay, but the book gives you a very bad example and it talks about it. So page 189, it talks about a line discussion about how snooker is played, and it goes on the next page. I mean, page 190 to talk about the snooker, and after that, the writers actually changed their attention from snooker to, in fact, language acquisition. Okay? We don't want to talk about snooker, we don't want to talk about Kuratul Qadam, we don't want to talk about football, volleyball, or basketball. Okay? We want to talk about language. So we begin it from page 119, line 1 of the new paragraph. Okay? So the book says the analogy illustrates the general properties of the evidence that are necessary for the acquisition. Okay. On the one hand, there is positive evidence. Positive evidence. We want to say what positive evidence is. Okay. Well, we want to talk about two things. One is positive evidence. The other is negative evidence. So the child has got two different types of evidence available to him to develop his mother tongue. Okay, let us see which one is available, positive evidence or negative evidence. Let us see. Okay, what is positive evidence? Line 2 says, the new paragraph on page 190, okay, says positive evidence are actually occurring sequences, actually occurring sentences. Okay, for example, sentences of the language are positive evidence. When actually the child listens to the sentence of the language, he is or she is exposed to positive evidence. Okay? What about negative evidence? Negative evidence is like this. On the other hand, line 3. On the other hand is negative evidence, such as what? Explanations. You explain to the child to say this kind of thing, not that kind of thing. This is negative evidence. Positive evidence, examples of the language. Negative evidence, the examples that you give to the child. Say like this, say it like that, do it like this, do like that. Okay? So line 3 says, such as explanations or corrections. Suppose the child says something wrong. Okay? Say no. In Arabic, we do not say something like that. In Farsi, we do not say something like that. Okay? So you make corrections. This is type 2. Okay? Or corrections of wrong sentences or ungrammatical sequences. Okay? That shows what may not be done. Okay? So if you explain to the child not to do something like that about language. You explain to the child to say something like this. Okay? Well, all these are in fact, negative evidence. What are the positive evidence? Type 1. Positive evidence are the actually occurring sentences. Okay? Just wait. We want to say one is good, the other is out. One is acceptable, one is out. Let us continue. Okay? So if you actually go to line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, page line 9, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Exactly on line 9 of the new paragraph on page 189, 190, okay? Well, we say that, but these possibilities are not available to the child. What type of passive available to the L1 acquisition? Except positive evidence. What does it mean? It means that the child only looks at the examples of the language he or she is exposed to. If you say something, they discard what you say. Actually, children are like that. You were all children and ask your fathers, ask your mothers, ask your older brothers, ask your older sisters. They say that you, not only you, all children are not in fact learning something from their mothers and fathers, especially when they're so young, 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. If you say don't do that, they go and do exactly what you say. Okay? In terms of language, you do not teach the child. The child actually is not in a position to learn something. Okay? In Iran, it is something like this, that the child goes to school at the age of 6 or 7. He goes to school at the age of 7. Okay? There he is taught mathematics and dictation. Okay? This is something. But in Arabic, in Iraq, there's another things to be added. Okay? Fusha. Fusha is to be taught to the child at the same time. Okay? What about earlier? You cannot teach a 2-year-old Fusha. Why? He's not exposed to. In terms of positive evidence, negative evidence, if the child is required with Fusha, he will be able to talk Fusha, even when he is at the age of 1 or 2. But if you actually talk your own dialect, your own lahja, the child develops only that lahja. You cannot teach a 2-year-old Fusha. Why? Because teaching is negative evidence. Explanations are negative evidence. Do's and don'ts are negative evidence. The child is not in a position to have negative evidence. So we say negative evidence is something that is out. We don't need it. Okay? About this, Chomsky actually talks about negative and positive evidence and puts it into direct and indirect. The result is something like 3 different types of direct, indirect, negative and positive evidence. Let us see. Page 190, the last paragraph says something like this. Chomsky recognizes 3 logically possible types of evidence for acquisition. Number 1, positive evidence. Okay, let us actually talk about positive evidence here and then go to page 191 and go to page 191 and to talk about type 2 and 3. Let us see. Well, positive evidence, the new paragraph on page 190, line 2. First comes positive evidence, okay? SV order, SVO order. What does it mean? Subject, verb, object order. Fixing a parameter of a core grammar, irregular verbs, adding a mark, periphery, etc. Well, the child actually goes to see that somebody says something like a sentence like number 1. The hunter chopped off the wolf's tail. Okay? So, when they hear, they understand from this sentence that the verb is the second element, subject. Verb, object. The first element is the hunter, that's the subject. Then it is after the subject, we have the verb, chopped off. And after that, we have the object, the wolf's tail. Okay? By exposing to a sentence like number 1, the child actually develops to understand that English is something like subject, verb, object. Okay? Let us go to Japanese. Page 190, example 2. Okay? So if you actually go to number 2, the first line is Japanese, the second line is the translation into English, the third line is a real translation in English, okay? A literal, or the line 2 is a literal translation, okay? So the Japanese guys actually say the granddad, the peach caught. Where is the verb? The verb is at the end of the verb. At the end of the sentence. Okay? So, in English, line 3 says, the granddad caught the peach. But in Japanese, this word caught in Japanese, appears at the end of the sentence. Okay? So, the child in Japanese develops to have something like number 2. Okay? It's like this. So, what does it mean? It is direct. In fact, it is positive evidence. What does the child do? The child actually looks at the sentence and understands that actually occurring sentences in English are like this. Whereas first we have the subject, next we have the verb, and after that we have the object. But the child in Japanese develops to have something like this. First there is the verb. The verb first, there is the, let's say, subject, next is object, and at the end we have the verb. Similarly, in Arabic, the child understands from these positive evidence available to them, from these types of positive evidence available to them, understands that Fusha is like this. First we have verb. Next we have subject. Next we have the object. Okay? So these are type 1 of Chomsky, which says that children actually develop from positive evidence actually occurring sentences that they see without, in fact, people around the child teaching the child, explaining to the child. Okay, let us go to type 2. Well, suppose you go to page 191, and suppose somebody says, well, suppose the child says something like this: man the old. Man the old. Not good sentence. Suppose a native speaker of English tells to her infant, baby, child, no, dear. In English we say the old man. The child actually does not understand this then. this kind of thing, and continues to, in fact, say whatever he or she says. So this is, as we say on line 1, 2, 3, 4, it is something like direct negative evidence. So if you give negative evidence directly to the child is not in a position to learn it. So while sentences 1 in English and 2 in Japanese are available to the child, and they understand the nature of the English or Japanese grammar, they do not understand sentences like 3 to be wrong or sequences like 3 to be wrong. And, well, they don't understand that something like 4 said by their parents is going to, in fact, work. They don't listen to the parents. They don't listen to the parents. Okay, this is type 2. Type 2. What was the type 2? Type 2, line 191, says direct negative evidence. The child is not in a position to have this type of evidence. Well, let us go to the third example. The third example is an example from Farsi and Arabic, but not English. Let us see. Well, suppose somebody says something like 5. Speaks in English is not right. It is not right. We have to say something like he speaks or she speaks. Speaks without he or she is not right. Sentence 5. It is not good. That's why there's a star in front of it. Okay? Or sentence number 6. Speaks he. Why? What about Persian? What about Arabic? Well, these sentences are, in fact, good in English and Arabic. Say, أنت تكلم. أنت تكلمي. Am I right? We can say without. We say تكلم. Without أنت. Similarly, in Farsi, we say حرف بزن. حرف بزن. تكلم. Or صحبت كن. Okay, تكلم. Without شما, which means you. It's good in Farsi. It's good in Arabic to say a sentence without anta, anti. It is good to say without to or shoma in Farsi. To means you singular, shoma means you plural. It is right. No difference. No difference. Okay? You can say أنت تكلم. You can say, well, تكلم. No difference. Both are right. But in English, they only say speak. They can say he or she speaks. Well, they cannot say speaks without he or she. Okay? So earlier we talked about, you remember, pro-drop languages like Farsi, like Arabic. They are pro-drop. What does it mean? P-R-O. P-R-O drop. P-R-O-D-R-O-P. Okay? P-R-O-D-R-O-P. Pro-drop languages. Farsi and Arabic are examples of pro-drop languages. Okay? English is non-pro-drop language. Okay? Well, what happens to the child? Let us see. So, line 1, 2, 3 says, below number 6, line 3 says something like this. There is good reason to believe that direct negative evidence is not necessary for language acquisition. Nobody says Arabic is something like, nobody says that Arabic is something like a pro-drop language. The child actually develops it type 1, not type 3. Okay? So it is like this. but indirect negative evidence may be relevant. Okay. Now, well, I am done with this part because it's going to be long. In fact, video, in fact, voice recorded. So I'm going to finish it just now on page 191.